I didn't believe the legend about spirits knocking on door, until I heard a knock on mine.
Growing up, I often overheard snippets of an old, unsettling legend whispered by the elders in my family. According to them, when someone in the house dies, their spirit might return, knocking on the door, bringing with them the emotions they felt at the moment of death. If they passed away peacefully, they would bring positive energy. But if they died with anger, regret, or sorrow, they would return with darkness in their wake. The legend was always vague, though no one ever said what exactly would happen if you answered or ignored the knock. But I didn't pay much attention to it. As a kid, it was just one of those creepy stories you hear but don't really believe. Years passed, and I grew up. I got a steady job, moved out of my parents' house, and eventually found myself sharing a small studio apartment with my girlfriend. It wasn't much, just a single room with a tiny kitchen and a bed in the corner, but it was ours, and we were happy. Life with her is good, actually it's better than good. But like any relationship, we've got our quirks. I've got this little hobby, obsession with video games. I can lose hours, even days, in those virtual worlds. On the other hand, she's the organized one, the responsible one, and she's always the one making sure everything's in order. It's not that I don't help out at all, I do, sometimes, but she's the one who really keeps things running smoothly. I know it might sound like I'm just being lazy, but we've found a balance that works for us. She's the kind of person who needs to keep busy, and I'm more laid back, let's put it that way. And honestly, she doesn't seem to mind. We laugh about it, joke about how I'm glued to my games while she's the one making sure we don't starve or drown in dirty laundry. It's our thing, our dynamic, and it's been working just fine until that night, when everything changed. It started out like any other evening. My girlfriend asked me to go to the grocery store to pick up some items, but I was in the middle of a game and couldn't pause. I told her I'd go after I finished the round. She just sighed, kind of annoyed, but didn't argue. A few minutes later, she left to do the shopping herself, leaving me engrossed in my game. Time flew by, and I lost track of how long she'd been gone. It must have been a couple of matches later when I heard the front door creak open slightly. I glanced over and saw her peeking through the gap. She softly asked me to come over, saying she needed to talk. I noticed she wasn't wearing any pants, just standing there with her top half covered, the rest hidden behind the door. I thought she was trying to tease me into leaving my game, so I laughed and told her to wait a minute while I finished. But her tone changed quickly. The soft invitation became a demand, then escalated into angry shouts. She screamed, her voice twisting into something sharp and unnatural. It startled me so much that I dropped the controller and stood up. Just as I was about to walk toward her, my phone buzzed loudly on the table beside me. It was a call from one of my friends. I picked up, not thinking much of it, but the urgency in his voice made me freeze. He told me that my girlfriend had been in a car accident right outside the store near his house. He said she didn't make it. The police were there, about to take her body away, and I needed to get there right away. I felt my heart drop, but disbelief quickly took over. I snapped back at him, telling him it wasn't funny because she was right here, standing at our door, calling me. But he insisted she was gone, that he wasn't joking, and I needed to come now, his voice even cracking. Confusion and fear gripped me. How could she be dead if she was right here? Without thinking, I rushed to the door and yanked it open. What I saw on the other side made my blood run cold. There she stood, but it wasn't her. At least, not entirely. On one side, she looked just as beautiful as always, her skin smooth and flawless, her long hair cascading down in soft waves, her lips curled into a soft, almost serene smile. But the other half was a mangled horror. Flesh was torn apart, hanging in ragged strips, barely clinging to the bone beneath. Her bones were shattered, jutting out at grotesque angles, sharp and jagged like the teeth of some monstrous beast. Where her skull should have been was a gruesome, caved-in cavity, exposing the splintered bone and the dark, pulpy remnants of what had once been her brain. Her eye on that side dangled from its socket, swaying slightly as if it might fall at any moment. Her torso was ripped open, a horrifying tear from her shoulder down to her waist. Her ribs were broken and twisted, some snapped in half, while others had pierced through the remaining flesh, their sharp ends glistening with blood. Inside, her organs were a tangled mess, spilling out and hanging limply, swaying with each small movement she made. The sight of her intestines, slick and covered in gore, intertwined with the shards of bone, sent a wave of nausea crashing over me. I slammed the door shut immediately, my hands trembling as panic surged through me. My mind was racing, my heart pounding so hard I could barely catch my breath. What was that? What had I just seen? The legend. I suddenly remembered the legend, but it came flooding back too late. I wasn't sure. Was I supposed to open the door? Or was that the one thing I shouldn't have done? My thoughts spiraled out of control, confusion and fear tangled together as I stood frozen in place, unsure of what to do next. The next thing I knew, she was at the window, her mutilated face pressed against the glass, still screaming at me. I grabbed anything I could find to block her out, shoving furniture in front of the window, but she just moved to the vents, the small gap under the door, every crack and crevice she could find, her voice haunting me, cursing me for all the things I hadn't done, for not going to the store, for not helping around the house, for everything. In my frantic state, I wrecked the entire apartment, barricading every possible entry point. I was a mess. Sweat pouring down my face, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Finally, I slumped against the fridge, the only solid object left to block the door. I thought maybe I was safe. Maybe I'd managed to keep her out. But as I sat there, trying to catch my breath, I heard a soft creak above me. The fridge door slowly opened, revealing an all too familiar face, her eyes now burning with rage and hatred, and a mangled hand reaching out from the darkness within. And then,